The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to AmericanSchismBook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Peter Funt. Hey, Peter, how are you?
I'm real good. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. When I saw your name, I kind of flashed back to my childhood. I remember your father very well, and I remember Candid Camera very well.
Me too.
I'm sure you do, yeah. And I'm looking at your bio. How involved were you with the show back in the day? I mean, did your father bring you on, or?
Yeah, kind of on and off my entire life. I got my first experience on Candid Camera at age 3 when my dad gave me a shoe shine box, sent me out on the streets of Manhattan in New York, and asked me to try to charge $10 per shoe for a shoe shine. I could barely talk, let alone shine shoes. He thought it might be cute. Funny thing is, sad really for my family and I, back then they didn't think to save the footage. You know, they put it on TV and then threw it out, literally. They never dreamed that so many decades later we'd be sitting here talking about it. But that was my first experience. And then all through my teens and into my 20s, I worked summers and whenever I could on the show. And then finally in the late 1980s, I joined my dad and eventually took over. So we had a lot of overlap there, and I guess you could say I got my baptism of fire early.
So your father was the creator of the show, is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. He invented this wonderful thing, first as a radio show in 1947 called Candid Microphone. And the very next year, 48, he brought it to television. And, of course, Candid Camera, between his work and mine, holds a record in television as the only entertainment show in television history to have produced new episodes in 8 different and consecutive decades.
Wow.
So certainly a lot of longevity for that great idea.
Oh, yeah. Now, back in the day, did he do the show live?
Well,
or did
perhaps you mean the studio intro part, because obviously the hidden camera sequences were always recorded on location. But really never live. Even the radio show in 47 was taped sequences and taped intros, and the same was true on television. And even when I was doing my series on CBS and years thereafter, we taped our studio portions a few days in advance, and the field sequences were always taped, days or weeks in advance to try to get together the best stuff.
I'm just thinking about like Edward R. Murrow and shows that were on at that time. A lot of stuff was done live television, but it'd be real hard, I think, to do Candid Camera live. Now,
might be impossible.
It might be impossible, yeah. Now, back in those days, though, the technology, you didn't have little mini cameras. You had huge cameras, probably film cameras, right? Not videotape
Yep,
cameras?
my
Yeah.
dad, that's right. He started with 16 millimeter film, and it wasn't until the late 60s that he segued to the early form of videotape. You know, I'm often asked about that the fact that cameras have gotten smaller and microphones smaller and all, and certainly that's made our work easier. But the fact is, to this day, when we shoot new Candid Camera scenes, we use pretty big size cameras. And the reason for that is we favor a single camera view. First of all, we hide one camera, not several. And the reason for that goes back to my dad's original concept, that the viewer would imagine as if they were peeking through a keyhole or a peephole. And of course, if you were doing that, if you were really eavesdropping, you wouldn't have multiple points of view that a director was cutting to.
That's
You'd
true.
have one single shot, as it were. But the other reason that we stick with fairly large equipment is that we don't like what might be called a surveillance camera view. You know, those 7-Eleven shots for security and all have kind of an odd fisheye look to them. And there are some shows that have tried to imitate us, and that's their idea of innovation, is to use all those little cameras all around the room. We just don't favor that. We think it actually looks less real, if you will, or fake. So we stick with our approach, and our imitators do whatever they want.
I know that I've been accused of being a cesspool of useless trivia.
Sounds familiar.
Even as a kid, I could remember the most obscure things, but then I couldn't remember the most obvious things. And a name that's just popped into my head while talking to you is John Bartholomew Tucker. He was a co-host on that show, is that correct?
Very briefly, the year 1974, Dad had JBT as his co-host, and it lasted one season, but Tucker moved on, and my dad next had as his co-host in that era Phyllis George, the famous former Miss America.
Phyllis George.
And, yeah, Phyllis George, and then various. Well, you know, the not-so-polite network term for what it turned out to be for Dad's career as well as mine is promotable female. They used to tell us we needed to partner up with a promotable female. And I guess what they meant was female to match with my dad and I as males, and promotable meaning if they're going to be a co-host on a show with which they really have no involvement except showing up for the intros, it'd be nice if they had some what they call promotion platform or some following of their own that made them promotable, and that would help us and help the show. So from that day on, my dad and then I was always teamed with a promotable female. And for most of my career, that was Suzanne Summers, and then it was Clint Eastwood's wife at the time, Dina Eastwood. More recently, Mayim Bialik, who, by the way, is my friend who I'm so proud of that she's getting this opportunity on Jeopardy. But, yeah, there's always been a promotable female close by, and actually I found that to be a blessing on television because, frankly, the more attractive that person was sitting next to me, the less I had to worry about how I looked on camera because nobody was looking at me anyway.
Well, there probably is some logic to that. I wanted to ask you about the actual situations. Did your father create all of the scenarios? Like, oh, today let's go put the camera in a laundromat, or did he do all of that?
Yeah. Well, at various times we had, what you might call idea people. They weren't writers really because there was nothing to write, but gag creators. But by and large, the honest answer to your question is my dad before me and myself. pretty much thought up most of the ideas for Candid Camera, and we sort of trained ourselves over many decades to keep our eyes out in everyday life for little things that drove us crazy or tickled our curiosity, or we thought we could mildly exaggerate to make something funny. For example, just a few hours earlier today before speaking to you, I was driving on a road with my brother in northern Connecticut, and they had just installed, he warned me, some new speed bumps. And good for them. It kept the speeders down. This was on a rural road. And I said, hey, John, I did a sequence about that a couple of years ago where we put, for at least one day, so many speed bumps that it was like every 5 feet. So it was just incredible to watch everything from a sports car to a UPS delivery truck banging and bouncing along these speed bumps, and our guy was there with a microphone to sort of get their feedback. It's very funny. My point in mentioning it, other than it truly just happened to me a few hours ago to talk about it, is that that's a perfect example of the type of thing from everyday life that Dad and I kept our eyes out for, and all we had to do was exaggerate it. If your thought was, gee, there's a lot of speed bumps on this road, you exaggerate that to a point of humor, and you've got a nice little social experiment.
Yeah, that is funny. Again, going back to my cesspool of useless trivia, I'm just remembering one particular episode that was probably done in the early 60s. And some guy pulls into a gas station back when they had full-serve gas stations, and you guys had created a car that had a 100-gallon tank.
Well, almost. The car didn't really have a 100-gallon tank. It was a small
It was a tiny little car,
to a
right?
VW Bug.
Yeah.
But the way it worked was the little car pulled in next to the pump, and across from it, accidentally on purpose, a panel truck that did have a 100-gallon tank pulled up, belonging to us, and unbeknownst to the service station attendant, we quickly attached a hose from one to the other. So the gas that he was pumping, or thought he was, into the little car was actually running through the hose into the big tank in the van, and thus, you're absolutely right, 100 or more gallons in this tiny little car.
Right.
That was a funny bit and a good bit of prop building to make that.
Yeah,
but a lot of these things, Douglas, that you're asking about are reviewed in my new book called Self-Amused. It just came out a few weeks ago. It's called Self-Amused, a Tell-Some Memoir. And it's a story about my experiences, Dad's experiences with Candid Camera, as well as a lot of these rather odd, I must say, business ventures that I partook of apart from Candid Camera when I wasn't working on the show. And then I tried to put in a bunch of humor. So I hope folks will look for that. It's called Self-Amused.
Okay. When did the book come out?
Book came out in August, so it's brand new. There's a hardcover and a paperback and a ebook, and it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and any place you buy books. Although the best deal, because we discount it on our own website, is at candidcamera.com, and there we'll give you, I think it's 30% off or something. So check that out if you're interested.
Okay, great. Was this a book born of COVID, or had you planned to do this prior to it?
Yeah, no, you're right. You got me there. In fact, I wrote a column in the Wall Street Journal about the epidemic of memoirs during the pandemic, because I thought I was so clever I'd make use of my time sheltered at home to write my story, only to find that just about everyone who had any kind of story wrote a book. There were more memoirs published in the past year than probably ever before. And good for them. I mean, it was a good use of time and a pleasure to keep occupied that way at home. We all have stories, whether we're on television or whatever we do. We've got stories and anecdotes and memories. Mine just happened to involve a national television show, so it makes it a little easier for me.
So what's the status of the show now? Is it still on, still in production someplace?
It's not in production right now, and we were sort of knocked down by the pandemic, but we're in talks with a couple of major networks to get back on. I think not in 2021, probably early 2022 we'll be back on, and looking forward to it because thanks to my dad's great idea, this is something that really can stay on TV almost forever. And my son Danny is now the third generation of Funts on Candid Camera. He works with me. So, we're looking forward to getting back with the folks. For now, other than my book, the best resource for getting some Candid Camera smiles is on our YouTube channel, which is called Candid Camera Classics. And we've got nearly 300 sequences on there. They're all free, so you could check that out. But yeah, probably in a few months, early next year, we'll be back on with new production.
Are the ones that are on YouTube, are they the old ones or a whole mix?
All of the above. And I find that so interesting because the YouTube clips I cover basically 1960 until 2018.
That's a long run.
So that's a
Yeah.
long time, and there's like 300 sequences that are spread over that period. What tickles me is that we get a lot of comments, below each clip on the YouTube channel. I love reading them, but so many people, especially during the pandemic and during the political upheaval that we've had in this country, write in the comments, those were the days. Why can't it always be like that? People were so nice back in those days. And I understand what they mean, but I don't think they're paying attention to the dating because they're writing that same comment about a sequence that was shot 50 or 60 years ago, but they're saying the same thing about a sequence that was shot 2 years ago. So they kind of in a time warp of nostalgia there. I think nostalgia is really whatever you make of it or whatever your memory is willing to give you.
It'd be interesting to see the ages of the people that are writing those comments.
Yeah, I try to figure it out from the way they put it, but I really don't know, and that's their privacy. And they don't often use their full name either. That on comments like this, it's a handle or a first name. But it's fascinating reading the comments. Most of them are favorable. Some of them are quite insightful and creative, even in terms of suggestions. But there's one idea that just tickled me of not really being able to distinguish 1960 from 2018 in terms of what constitutes the good old days.
Well, it also says something about the sort of timeless aspect of your father's original idea, because this could just go on forever. It isn't dated.
Exactly. And, I always point out that, sure, styles change. By that I mean clothing or haircuts or the types of cars we drive. Many things change over time, obviously, but human nature is essentially unchanged from the day my dad first started observing it. And that does create a timeless quality for us. People are people.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's a little oversimplified to say, well, back in the day, people were simpler times and less technology in people's lives. True, but doesn't really change the basic fabric of human nature.
Well, there are certain shows and films that are just going to be funny forever. I mean, Candid Camera is certainly one of them. I Love Lucy. I still laugh hysterically watching that show. And I've seen them all 100 times, but they are just funny. Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah,
you can
we
go
each
back
have
further.
our favorites, absolutely. I mean, you know, among slightly more recent sitcoms, so many of us love The Office and Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And then, you know, then people go off in different directions, but good comedy is good comedy. And in fact, I think the mark of good comedy, or one of the marks, is that it is timeless. You sort of, I mean, even if you go way back to Jackie Gleason's Honeymooners shows, sure, there's a dead giveaway that it's black and white and it's very simplistic stage sets and all. There's no mistaking that for the present. But the fact is, the dynamic between Ralph Cramden and Alice Cramden, that dynamic rings true today. It doesn't matter what clothing they're wearing or what, you know, the paint in their apartment was. That's the same stuff that couples fuss about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lucy and Ricky. Exactly the same stuff that people argue about. Over money, she spends too much. Again, like you said, good comedy is good comedy, and great acting is also timeless.
Yep.
Just the interaction between the people. You know, when you hit
I
that.
couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Cheers was another show like that. The dynamic between Ted Danson and Shelley Long, was that her name?
Shelley Long.
Yeah.
A place where everybody knows your name, and there was a comfort level developed with that wonderful show that was a television form of the same comfort you might achieve by going to your neighborhood tavern where everybody knew your name, or at least most did. And that's a great part of life and relatable. And so that setup made really good television.
Yeah.
But, as you say, only in the hands of super talented performers and writers and so forth.
Oh, yeah, it's got to all come together. If one of the components is missing, it won't hit. Won't hit at all.
Probably not.
Yeah. Well, Peter, we got to wind this down. Thanks so much for coming on. This was fun. Again,
well, I appreciate it.
Give out the website, please.
Sure. Easy to find us. It's candidcamera.com. And at our website, you can find the link to our YouTube channel and go right to those 300 videos. You can find our Facebook link, but you can also find out how to get a good discount on my book, Self-Amused. And it's all right there, one-stop shopping at candidcamera.com.
Great. Thanks again for coming on. It was nice talking to you.
My pleasure. Nice to talk to you, Douglas. Take care.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on The Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hey, this is Ray Powers. Don't touch anything. You've got it right where you need it. Tuned in to the Douglas Coleman Show. You heard me.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Johnny Welsh. How are you, Johnny?
Good. How you doing, Douglas? Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. So let's see. According to your bio, you're a professional bartender, humorous writer, and you also write travel adventure books?
I do, yes.
Well, I know what a bartender does, so there's probably not a lot of need to go into that in great detail. How did you get started writing travel adventure books?
Well, the travel adventure, it all started with my writing in general, which actually began behind the bar as a bartender, because you can imagine the content that I witness on a nightly basis is endless. And I began to compile some stories that I had witnessed behind the bar, and add a little more humor to that, and splash of wine here and there, and all of a sudden you've got a topic you can elaborate on, do some research, and create a book about. And the travel book was inspired when the whole smartphone craze, the phone craze, the devices, the tablets, you name it, seeing that in the restaurant setting and how the interaction between people is diminishing, that inspired me to have my girlfriend and I create a bet, and the bet was for to unplug during a road trip. And that road trip, we had a funny nickname for it, and it was called Paper Maps, No Apps. It was kind of a joke at first, to see who can unplug the longest. Because of that, every person we met on the road, it was kind of like Wizard of Oz. They started to join up with us and follow our lead. We had never expected that to happen, and before we knew it, there was too many stories compiling in this adventure that we began to write them down, and coupled that with some photos for a photo journal and a travel journal. And that's how the whole travel adventure writing began, right there.
Well, I haven't been into a bar in years, but is that really what's happening now? People are coming into a bar, having drinks, and rather than talking to each other, they're just sitting there by themselves with their phone, chatting or texting or whatever. Is that how it looks now?
A lot of times, Douglas, yes. I'm more I bartend more in a restaurant than actual a bar.
Okay.
And yes, I do see that. A lot of individual travelers will come in, and instead of interacting with each other and trying to find like what to see and do in the place that they're visiting, they just knee-jerk reaction, turn it on, and their heads are down.
I don't know. I don't think that's a good thing. I really don't.
No, clearly not.
And I see it with the kids. Kids are having a real tough time with interaction in real time. On the phone, they're okay. It seems like everybody has to have this little protection between them. Rather than meeting people face to face, you can meet people through your phone, through your apps. It's kind of like these trolls that type all of these hideous comments on Twitter or whatever, but in real life, they would never say that to your face.
No. It reminds me of we have a joke about that amongst the older bartenders and everything, how like back in the day when you would say something like that to somebody in the schoolyard, you got smacked in the head. And now that doesn't happen anymore. So people are free to just, keep on trolling and adding those hideous comments, as you said.
Well, it's true. Although the good side of that, the flip side might be less bar fights because people are talking to somebody who's 200 miles away on their phone rather than somebody right in their face.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, yeah.
That could be the positive side.
Sure.
The other thing I see on your bio that I wanted to bring up was the weed legalization in Colorado. Now, it's been legal for several years now, right?
Yes, 7.
7 years.
Actually, it's 9 years since the vote passed, but it took them 2 years to actually enact all the laws and the new rules and regulations. So 2012 was the vote. 2014 is when they went live with the recreational sales of marijuana. Yes.
Okay. Was Colorado the first state?
Yes.
It was. All right.
Yes.
Because we just got it here 3 years ago, maybe.
Right.
So it's legal in Nevada. And I don't know. I don't see people all over the streets all crazy. They were that way before it was legal. So
yeah, this is true.
It hasn't really affected. I know that in Colorado you guys had a huge state budget surplus after the first year of the taxation of the weed, which I thought was great. I've been a proponent of weed legalization for decades, but on a national level, and I think our government is stupid to not take advantage of the huge tax revenue that would be there if they nationalized marijuana and taxed it even at 50%. People are still going to buy it, and they could fund probably the national health with that money. And it just doesn't make any sense why, even on a federal level, marijuana is still considered in the same category, Class A, as as heroin and
as the hardcore drugs.
As the hardcore drugs. Makes absolutely no sense. I mean, I know it got stuck in there back probably in the 1930s or 40s, but
30s exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I don't get it. So basically in Colorado, you can buy it if you're over 21. You go to the weed stores, right?
Yes.
Are the weed stores private or are they state-run?
They're private.
They're private, okay. But they have to have a license from the state.
They are regulated by the state, correct.
Like liquor. It's basically the same idea. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
All right.
I wish that when they first had the vote that, more states would have legalized at the same time, because at the first, it was Colorado and Washington were the first two. Colorado was the first to go live with the actual recreational sales on January 1st, 2014. Washington didn't get their stuff together until about, I think it was July that year. So for the first 6-7 months, it was just Colorado. It became a funnel for just people coming here for the novelty of it, just to go ahead and have a picture of themselves buying weed in the store. It was kind of funny at first, but we did get a really big influx of people, and that has been compounded since the pandemic as well.
Yeah, when I was in my 20s, we used to fly to Amsterdam and do that.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah. That was kind of the fun thing to do, stand out in front of a weed shop.
Yeah.
How many states now have legalized it? Was it like 12?
No, I think it's in the 20s now. I haven't even ever keep track.
Oh, is it that many? Yeah.
I believe so, yeah. And there's more that have the medicinal side only, and now they're going from the medicinal only to having medical and recreational as well. I think it's upwards of 20-something right now. Well,
my sort of feeling about it is that once it hits the halfway mark, 25 states or better, then the Supreme Court's going to have to rule on it, rather like gay marriage.
Right.
When states started legalizing gay marriage, and then it got to 26 or 27, something like that, and then there was the landmark case in New York, and then it became legal. So I think it's going to come soon. At least I hope it does, where they just completely overhaul the concept that weed is as bad for you as heroin.
Right.
On the books. I think that's just insane.
Yeah. And the thing is the states that still have it illegal, it still exists there. I could go to any state right now that has it that's against the law, and I bet I could find it. Anyone can. People that want to find it can find it anywhere. So it's already there. It's already being sold and consumed. Might as well get the revenue from it.
So have you noticed any reduction in the criminal element now? Similarly to when they repealed Prohibition, where it put all the gangsters out of business.
A little bit at first, but now I think there's a resurgence of that coming up, because the taxing of it is, they keep on adding more and adding more and adding more. You might as well just call Joey down the street and have him bring over a baggie from now on, and save the taxes. But I mean, I think both. It'll always be a market for both. The recreational market as well as the underground market. There's always going to be a market for both. And a lot of it is the novelty of going to a store and buying it. Plus, there's a good quality. You know what you're getting. It is regulated. It is organic. Potentially better for you than what you could be finding in the street with someone who's homegrown. You don't know if you're using chemicals or pesticides. It's the same with anything, really. So you pick and choose what you want to do in life, and it's there in every angle you want to get it.
Well, I like all the names. I mean, I went into one around here not too long ago. I don't smoke the stuff, but I just wanted to go look. And I just love the names of some of them. Purple Trainwreck, I think, was probably my favorite name. I mean, that just sounded like such a great 60s album cover.
Yeah, it does. And there's a lot of names of it. I rarely smoke it all anymore because it is just so strong. And it's not the same that I'm used to when I was growing up on the East Coast. It's really strong now. It's a whole different kind of a buzz altogether.
Yeah, I've heard that the newer stuff is about 100 times stronger than what it was back in the 70s and 80s. That's for sure. So what else? What else are you doing? Do you make a living at being a bartender? Yeah.
You know, I do, and I have. I mean, I went to Syracuse University, got my degree in a foreign language. I could have done anything I wanted to, but I got hooked on traveling, because when I went overseas to study in Italy, I was really exposed to so many different perspectives, so many different cultures and countries. I was like, wow, the world is not what I was brought to believe it was, growing up, from one perspective, from one country, one government. So it was kind of cool to see that, and I enjoyed that perspective changing. And so the travel, I was hooked on it. And being a bartender afforded me to actually travel and take the time off to do that.
What do you have to do to become a bartender? Do you have to get licensed? Do you need a particular kind of degree? How does that work?
I always joke about my degree, because my degree is in Italian literature, language, and culture. So I said that's a great prerequisite for a bartender.
Oh, sure. In Italy,
no, some states have licenses. I know there's union bartending jobs. You have to pass certain tests, and there's all kinds of things they have to make happen. But a lot of states, I think if you know your drinks and you're a hard worker, you can get a job bartending.
Okay. And you certainly are, what do they call that? Gratuity intensive? Where
gratuity based, yeah.
Gratuity based, rely on
gratuity, yeah, sure.
Do people tip bartenders well, typically?
Yeah, it depends on the people. It depends on the bartender. I've been doing it for so long now, so yes, my tips they're more than decent, and I'm very grateful for that. And I like to have fun and get to know people. But this past year and a half, after this whole world-changing climate we're in,
well, yeah, that would have.
We're so much busier now. We are so busy in Colorado, and we're so short-staffed. I can't keep up. I can keep up with the drinks, but I can't sit and talk to someone and ask where they're from. What brings you to Colorado? What do you want to do? What do you want to see? That is going away, because I'm just nonstop reading drink after drink for hours on end and cranking out insane amount of drinks.
Well, I think people have had cabin fever, so now that things are relaxing, people are just busting loose to get out of the house,
Now they have happy hour fever.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is good. True. It's good to have people come out and, and realize what they missed when they were, told to stay home. I think they realized, they have to appreciate actually being able to go out and be social and interact with people. And then that, once again, that brings back the whole phone thing where, at the restaurant, are you going to go out and be social and actually physically social, or are you going to sit there and drink and look at your phone?
So you actually wrote a book about the legalization of marijuana called
Weedgalized.
Oh, Weedgalized. Okay.
Weedgalized in Colorado, True Tales from the High Country. That was a non-biased look at the what happened for the whole legalization process in Colorado, the vote, the emotions of the people that were for it and against it. I interviewed both sides of the coin on that one to get a good perspective of what was happening at the time. A lot of the new companies that were up and coming, they were trailblazers, not only in Colorado, but the nation, because if you were first to have those companies in Colorado, you were the first in the nation back in 2014, which was kind of neat to see their backgrounds, what they envisioned, what they hoped to accomplish, and what they were passionate about.
How is it doing in Colorado in terms of the revenue for the state? Are you still running a surplus?
I believe we are. Yeah, it's in the billions now. $1 billion per year, I believe it is. What's funny or fascinating to me is the side companies, the side businesses, the ancillary businesses like the grow lights, the organic soils, the warehousing, the computer, the POS. There's so many aspects of this industry, and it goes beyond just a marijuana shop. Whereas medical and rec, you have there's topicals, there's sprays, there's toothpaste, deodorant. They have a lot of the creams that actually really do the CBD, which is not psychoactive. The CBD actually helps alleviate. I've used it myself. Alleviate a lot of the pains and aches and pains you may have.
That's like the marijuana cream that you put on?
Yes, but there is no marijuana in it. It's just a CBD extract, which is not the THC, which is the psychoactive element.
Oh, okay, right. But I mean, it's applied like sports cream or something.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Moisturizer cream, sports cream. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How much is allowed to be grown personally in your home these days?
The last I checked, it was 6 plants per person. 3 were allowed to be budding plants, and 3 on their way to being budding. So that's what it was originally. I mean, they've been changing these laws back and forth nonstop. So it could be different right now. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember it was 6 last time I checked.
Okay, and then the people that are growing for the stores are commercial growers, right?
Yes,
and
they have a different license.
And that requires a different license. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, it all sounds very interesting. I just hope that our federal government gets it together and puts this thing to bed once and for all, and we get on to more important issues, because they're just looking at billions of dollars going right down the toilet, which they could be putting in their coffers and, leave our income alone.
Yeah. That's
my opinion, for what it's worth.
No, I agree. Yeah, you grab the money, fix the roads, the schools, create more jobs.
Yeah.
The amount of jobs that are out there right now because of the whole industry as a whole is mind-boggling. The vape, not the vape shops, just the stores that sell the accessories that go with it. It's just there's so many things that are out there. It's just amazing. Even simple things like T-shirts and novelties and knickknacks, things like that. Yeah. They're everywhere. They have the little card, a business card out here, and it has a little fake piece of weed glued to it, and it has a little flower pot glued to it, and it says "a little pot from Colorado." So whenever your friend says, "Hey man, bring back a little pot from Colorado," you bring this little card that has a little pot on it. Like funny things like that. They're everywhere. You name it, they're a dime a dozen.
All right. Well, I think on that note, Johnny, we got to wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. It's my name. It's johnnywelsh.com. JOHNNYWELSH.com. Has my books, my bartender jokes and gags on there as well.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Nice meeting you and nice talking to you. Best
Likewise, Douglas. Thank you.